Hello and good evening. I'm Michelle Carter. I am the director of the Aram Public Library, and with us this evening is Laura Plummer. Laura is the Assistive Technology Program Coordinator in the Office for Physical Disabilities and Independent Living with the Bureau of Aging and Disability Resources at the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. Thank you for joining us tonight, Laura. Laura will be leading us through technology in the home that is both assistive and helpful to our loved ones that might be near or far. And take it away, Laura.
Great. I love how you described that about near or far. That's perfect. So good evening, everybody. Happy to be here to share some information about some technologies, strategies, and solutions. So as it was shared, so I oversee several federal assistive technology programs for the state of Wisconsin, and I am located within the Department of Health Services. And so this is some information that I've been compiling for quite a long time, but obviously with the pandemic, we've had a lot more interest in technology and connections and the tools and the ways in which we can stay engaged with others and reduce isolation for those that can't connect. So I'll go ahead and advance our slides. So on the screen is something you're not meant to read, but this is an example of questions that I've been getting the past few years from family members, from care providers, from service providers, aging and disability resources centers, as well as libraries in the general community. They're wanting to know what's the quick, easy, down and dirty way that they can use technology to connect with others, their loved ones, their family members, close or far. And so obviously by the number of words on this slide, it shows there's lots of questions and lots of things to consider and think about. So the point of this is that there are no simple answers. And often if I'm asked these questions, I have just as many questions that I hand back to that individual to help try to narrow down some answers for them. So on the screen is just a little bit of fun. This is a picture, a series of a black bear, a young black bear in a friend's yard. And the reason I show this is when we try to pick out technology solutions for folks, it is really a matter of problem solving. We have to think through the situation. We have to think around the situation. And then finally, we generally end up with a strategy or solution or solutions to help with that social isolation. So on the screen is a bear, a young bear. He's hungry, he or she. So he decides to go after the bird feeder in the yard. It's on like a shepherd's hook. And so obviously it swings around, hard to eat from the standing position. So he manages to bend it down to the ground, lays down and starts to eat and enjoy that. So this is just representing how we need to be thinking through a situation and working through that problem solving process. So actually, I think I clicked, there we go. All right, a little bit of delay on my laptop here. So we want to think through the goal. So when I get those questions, I ask, so is it the individual who's isolated that is asking for this help? Is it the family member? Is it the care provider? And so many times there's a lot of there's reasons, obviously we want to do family visits, we want to check in with people. We worry about the lack of engagement because we all know what can happen with that. People become disinterested in things. They may not do their hobbies. They may not eat as well as they should, may not sleep as well or sleep too much with that lack of engagement. Are we wanting to address daily living goals? So assisting the person with adjusting their thermostat or making their meals, arranging for deliveries. Are we worried about personal care and the care providers being able to come in and out of the home? If personal care is being done, who's washing their hair, for example? Managing the home environment, and then finally just safety and peace of mind. And this is where I do like to share that I do have my mother is 85, And at the beginning of the pandemic, she had lost my dad about a year before that. And she had just lived in her own, we'd moved him into an apartment that was part of a building so she could go down for meals. And she had just started kind of coming out and looking to do things. And so, you know, I've kind of watched firsthand what has happened to someone that is isolated and the results of the pandemic. And so I've had, you know, a reason to really delve into this as part of my job, and then have had to deal with doing this as part of personal as well. So in the end, it is, whose goal is it? And is it the family member or the caregiver that is all gung-ho to try all these things and get all this stuff done? Or is it the individual? Often it's a mix. But what I've seen happen sometimes is people will project their needs for connection, their needs for friends onto someone who may be feeling comfortable with being alone, and it's not bothering them. So we have to always step back and think about whose goal is it, why we're trying to increase connection and introduce technology. Oh, sorry, my laptop is doing a little bit of crazy. All right. So when we talk about communication, obviously that's the first way we look to connect. And we have face-to-face. So we're able to, now we're at least able to engage with folks in person, obviously using care. But for a long time we weren't. And so our primary way of communicating with someone who's isolated was taken away. But remember, we can always send letters. I know in this day and age of email, it's hard to remember that you can take a card or a piece of paper and write on it and put it in the mail. We've got telephone, email, we've got video. And how is that person comfortable communicating? Is it all of it? Is it just one? Or is none of it working? So just keeping in mind that we've got a wide range of communication options. So for that communication, on the one hand, we've got the options. On the other hand, we have our barriers. And so what we have really found throughout the past 2 years is that number one, there's a lack of access to the devices themselves. So someone may not have the ability to purchase. So you've got a financial barrier. They may be in a rural area where there isn't service available, or maybe they're in a facility that is reluctant to allow things that are connected to be connected in that facility. The individual needs to be willing to use the device or the services that are offered. My mom, for example, was in her day, she knew computers, she used email, she shopped online. However, that skill set dwindled. And so we learned several years before the pandemic that she just didn't have a willingness to use those devices. You'd give her an iPad for Christmas. It would sit on the table and not be used. And so even though that technology was available to her, she didn't have that desire. We also have digital literacy. And when I refer to that, it means that it's the skill set to be able to use. So someone may have a desire to use technology, but maybe they never did, or their cognitive skills have declined such that they really can't use it. And in the case of my mom, we really feel that that's part of it. Nothing diagnosed, but she had has a lot of pride, and then started to forget how to use her computer. So instead of asking for help or she became worried about looking dumb, so she didn't want to ask for that help. So it was easier just to not use it at all, because then it didn't make her feel inadequate. Another barrier is the support that's available for setup, for training, for maintaining. I'll talk a little bit about a device that we placed it inside my mom's apartment that I can control, one of the Echoes, but yet one day it was acting pretty goofy and there was nothing I could do. And so I had to wait till my sister could go and basically unplug the device and plug it back in. So those are some pretty big barriers that we do face when we're trying to implement and roll out some solutions. There are additional barriers beyond those. We have cultural and gender and racial considerations. So there are some trust issues regarding the use of connected devices in some cultures, as well as within some ethnicities. There's generational barriers. A big one that we sometimes forget about is judicial. So we often might work with someone that maybe has limitations that were placed upon them due to past behavior in the criminal justice system, where they're not allowed to have connected devices. We've got language. We have a segment of individuals that are homeless, that do not have access. Individuals that are undocumented, they are much more likely to, less likely to reach out for assistance with service programs for fear of that undocumented status. And then our people with disabilities, various things, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, can impact. So the barriers are more than just getting the device, buying the device, setting it up. There's a lot of other underlying currents related to that connectivity. So I'm going to switch gears here and we're going to actually talk about some technology solutions. So on the screen are a variety of what I would call higher tech options for communication. We have a Facebook portal, we have an iPad, we have a GrandPad, I've got a Chromebook on the bottom left, a Verizon hotspot, and then an Echo Show. And then placed on the screen is also a Wi-Fi symbol. And the purpose of that is because these devices, while they can do some things standalone, they really do require connectivity. And so the person must have access to wireless high-speed wireless internet. So either through their cable provider, their building provider, or a Verizon hotspot. So in the situation with my parents, long ago, my dad decided he didn't like cable. So there was going to be no cable internet installed in their apartment or their home. And so he at that time chose a hotspot. And we continued to use that, which allowed us to be able to provide wireless internet in their home without him having to have a service provider. All right. So then we kind of drop down in the technology ladder to some middle tech options, is what I call them. These devices have less bells and whistles. They often are things that are less intimidating for people. They kind of blend in with the coffee table, but they can still provide that connection. So on the screen, I have an Echo Dot, which is the black one on the upper left. And then I have a Google Nest Mini or a Home Mini on the right, which is a white device. And so those are voice activated devices that can do any number of things for individuals. They can tell you the dates, tell you how to make food. It can tell you, it can play music for you, and all with just some simple commands. So for someone that maybe is a little bit more tech phobic, these are less intimidating, and they may be more likely to be used if you just give someone a list of commands. On the bottom is one that's even less intimidating, and it's basically a digital picture frame, but it is connected. So just from a receptive standpoint, you could have a family member that can just simply upload pictures, and this will just continue to play those pictures, maybe share, grandkids, family members, happenings, but it's another way of connecting. On the screen, you do see the Wi-Fi symbol again, because although these are simpler than some of our other devices, these still will require connectivity. So again, you're going to need to have high-speed internet in order for them to perform their function. So any questions so far? All right. So I'm going to jump over to some other type of technology called smart technology. And these are everyday mainstream pieces of technology, as are the other devices that we've shown. But these can be used for management of the home, either by the individual themselves or by a caregiver. And so I'll just sort of run through what we show on the screen here. So on the upper left is a smart thermostat. So this is a programmable thermostat that can be controlled remotely with the app that you see on the far right. So I've had family members that are worried, you know, in the winter, I can't get over there to check mom's thermostat to make sure she's warm enough. Or my parent calls me and says they're cold or they're too hot, but they're intimidated, maybe they're confused, or they just are reluctant to adjust their own thermostat. So a family member has the app, they can just adjust that thermostat remotely for that person. We do have cameras as part of that system, as part of many systems. Again, those are things that you need to be mindful of how you're using something like a camera in a caregiving situation. And you want to make sure that they are aware that you do have a camera there. We've also got things like a smartwatch, which is an Apple Watch on the bottom left. And these devices can, let someone know that their phone is ringing. They can provide fall detection. So if they fall and they have an iPhone, it will actually call their ICE contact for them. It can provide health data. And so maybe that's a motivator for someone. Maybe seeing their little circles get completed every day is enough to keep them engaged and walking around their apartment or going for a walk outside. We can also use things like location apps. So on the bottom to the right of the Apple Watch is the Life 360 app. And this is an app that can be placed on a phone, and you can set up sort of a family circle so that you can see where someone is because of the GPS in their phone. It's helpful because it can also tell you if their phone is low on battery. So my mom, we have this app on her phone, and I would be like, oh, she's only got 3% left on her battery. So then I could call her and say, hey, can you go plug your phone in? When they were both still driving, it allowed me to know, I could see where they were, and it gave me peace of mind. And they were fully aware that this is on their devices, but it's a great way for that peace of mind. Maybe you have someone that wanders, but they still carry their phone. You can set up a kind of a net around their home so that if they leave the house, you'll get an email that says, so-and-so left the house, so-and-so came home. And we laugh because in my household, my husband did that for me. So every time that I leave the house or come home, our joint email gets an email that says I did that. So we laugh about it. There are also tools called If This and That. And this is, again, another app, but it uses the GPS in a phone to maybe unlock a door when someone comes to the house, maybe a caregiver or a family member. And a lot of this is controlled by the app. I happen to show the Nest system here. I use that in our own home. But you can, as a caregiver, you can unlock the door, you can lock the door, you can check the door, you can check the different areas of the house along with that thermostat. And I am not able to see chat while we are presenting. So if there is a question, please let me know. And then we step back to some of the lighter tech options, the things that aren't going to be as intimidating, as fancy, most likely cheaper.
Yeah. Laura, excuse me, we do have a question.
Okay, great.
If the Wi-Fi breaks down, like the thermostat and far away, how can you reconnect?
Oh, so she's asking if her thermostat breaks down, how does she reconnect? Because the Wi-Fi
Broke down.
broke. Oh, because the Wi-Fi broke down.
Yeah. Like you disconnect.
And then, right. And then how do you get help to fix that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the question.
Yep. So I've had that. We have two homes, and I've been at one where the Wi-Fi went down at the one. And one, it was winter and I wasn't there, and I'm like, oh, great. So the thermostats, smart thermostats will continue to run on their set schedule. So even if your Wi-Fi disconnects, it doesn't mean your furnace stops. So that's your number one concern, obviously pipes freezing, things like that. Number two, I have had instances where it will just reconnect. So maybe my cable internet is down at the street, and when it comes back on, my router restarts and it will then connect. There is a possibility that it will not, and you would have to have someone come in and maybe reprogram it right at the thermostat. But I can tell you from experience that ours has always reconnected. And then one other thing just as long as we're on that, I will share some personal experience I've had. We use smart locks at our home, meaning I can unlock it with my app or a keypad on the door. And we do have to be cautious with that because number one, with the extremes of temperature, especially in Wisconsin, when it could be -30, you have battery concerns, that the batteries within that smart lock. And so I always recommend, if you're going to get a smart door lock, you get one that you can still put a real key in and turn. Because if you can't put a real key in and the keypad batteries go dead, you are out of luck. So again, those are those questions and weighing the pros and cons on things like that. Did that answer the question? I will assume it did. All right.
Laura,
Yeah.
yeah, it did. So thank you.
Sure. Okay. So the lighter tech things, and I mentioned a few of these earlier, but it's things like sending letters, sending cards. About two or 3 weeks ago, my mom broke her hip, so did end up in a care facility. And so I've been popping cards in the mail to her. I've sent her photos from Snapfish or Shutterfly, one of those two. I've been doing that periodically through the pandemic, but it was something that I thought of early on. Was she no longer was using, wouldn't use the iPad, so she no longer was on Facebook, and she couldn't see the things, our family was doing on the weekends or for fun. And so I just started every month, I would just upload a bunch of pictures to Snapfish and have them mailed to her. So in the mail, she would get a packet of pictures that she could look at. We could talk on the phone and I could say, this is that picture and this is that picture. So it was a way to keep that engagement going. We can still use the phone. On the picture, I have a caption phone. So if someone has a hearing loss, they could utilize a phone that has the words so that they can read and hear. It's things like arranging for delivery of some groceries or delivery of things to do. I've got a picture of a puzzle here. We all saw stories of window visits that were occurring during the pandemic. My sister just actually did that this last week because a staff member of the care facility tested positive. So she went and stalked the windows and found the one that my mom was in. And then in the bottom is a product called a Road ID. So road, like the road, ROAD ID. And this is a medical alert type bracelet. So if you have someone that maybe has some wandering concerns, or someone that maybe has a disability where they can't say who they are, these bracelets are very inexpensive, and they come with a little emblazoned, they come in different colors. They can be bigger, smaller, you can have a shoe tag, all sorts of, you can bling it up. But it allows you to have all that information about someone directly on there. And then what's really nice is for $10 a year, you can make a secure account with them. And so then that person's medical information is included on there. So an EMT will see this bracelet, this Road ID, and then they can actually call Road ID with this code. And then they could know, like, who's the emergency contact, what medical issues do they have, what allergies, and what hospital, what insurance, things like that. So I always include the road ID when I talk about caregiving and just communication. It's a great tool. I'm not sponsored by Road ID, but I swear by them. We gave them to my parents for Mother's and Father's Day about 10 years ago. And then I would just renew it every year for them. And the bracelets themselves are under $20. So they are super durable. Yeah, I've got a delay in my computer today.
Laura, there's another question. Where
Great.
do you get the bracelet?
It's roadid.com. And at the end, I can put that in the chat. But I mean, you could have a different color for every outfit if you wanted. That's how inexpensive they are. So one of the issues that came up with the pandemic was care facilities and privacy. So suddenly you had maybe a staff member is trying to use their phone with someone so they could call a loved one. They're trying to use an iPad. Maybe the person has a hearing loss, maybe they don't, but that privacy became an issue. And so I always include information about considering the different types of earpieces and ways that we can get the sound in. I don't know if you've spent any time in a care facility, but there's also a lot of sound, and it could just be overwhelming to hear different sounds and you're trying to focus on a conversation. So just looking at different types of headsets. I've got some behind the ear headsets are in the upper left. We've got some headsets that connect to the television, some earbuds. On the right side are earbuds, and then there are as a set of bone conduction headphones, which are super helpful if someone has in-ear hearing aids, because if we cover the hearing aids, we might get squealing. So these actually sit right in front of the ears, and they allow the sound to transmit via bone conduction. These were designed for runners and athletes, so they could hear cars and be aware of their surroundings at the same time as hearing their music. And so I've had great success with those. And then the bottom are just some wireless earbuds that can be helpful as well. And then we have some extras, things that we need to think about if we are setting up technology for people. Number one is electrical access. So on the upper left is a picture of a power strip. Most of these devices that we're talking about require electricity, and homes just aren't always designed with the outlets where we need them. And so we need to think about safety, not dragging, cheap extension cords from room to room. And so utilizing proper electrical is really important. Things like we can use like a dry erase board to communicate or to write instructions. So if someone's getting an Amazon Echo, it could have, here's the questions that you could ask. And then the person gets used to asking those questions. So you quickly just change them over to broaden their vocabulary and more things that they could talk to Alexa about. We might need to think about ways to keep the device from sliding on a table. I gave my mom an Echo Show, so that's the video one. But I was worried it might slide off the table. So I just put some non-skid material underneath it so it would stay in one spot. On the bottom left are some zip ties, but they're Velcro. So maybe you worry about someone, bumping the device or pulling a cord wrong. So you can Velcro down those wires, the plugs, the wires. On the upper middle is a set of colored electrical tape. So this is really good if someone needs to remember a process, step 1, 2, and 3. Most all of us remember our stop and go lights. And so using red to show stop, green for go, yellow for caution. You can also use white to label things. Maybe it's a remote control that has all these fancy buttons on it. And so we just want to tape over all the buttons they don't need, but we know they want to know like volume up or volume down. We can use tape or we can indicate that using different colors and different textures. And then on the bottom are bump dots. So these are just little peel and stick dots that allow someone to feel it or see something better, primarily for vision loss. But it's great if someone, you know, if there's 3 buttons on something and you could tell someone, yeah, hit the one that's sticking up higher. You can just raise it up a little bit. So just thinking about those extra things that can help someone utilize something easier with less frustration. All right. So we're going to go back a little bit to those barriers or considerations is what I really like to call them. And that whole long list of questions that I got and showed you. Usually this is the first area. Someone will ask about, you know, what device can we get? And we need to take a look at, you know, geographically, what is available from a service provider standpoint. Is cable internet available? Is it only DSL? Is it satellite? And if it's satellite, is the dish in an area where someone can clear the snow off of it if it snows? Because if a satellite gets covered in snow, it doesn't work. So who's the service providers and what's available? And then it's what is the cost availability of that? You know, we know that sometimes the rural areas, it can be more expensive because the companies have had to make up for running the wires, you know, to the different areas. And can that person afford it? Average internet, I think, is, at least in my experience right now, is between $70 and $75 a month. So does that person have the ability to pay for that? And then what is the bandwidth of that service? DSL doesn't carry quite the bandwidth that cable does. And then the other things to think about, I talked about the electrical in the home, and how is that wiring? But then in the buildings and the facilities, you know, are they allowing this? They need to, but you need to ask and work with them on what you may want to be putting in there. And then the actual accessing the device or using the device. There are things related to someone's health. So do they have a hearing loss or a vision loss? Do they have physical limitations that make it harder maybe for them to type or to control a button or to hold a phone? Are there cognitive or memory issues? So as I shared with my mom, she just kind of lost the ability and then didn't ever wanted to do it again. And that's with that digital enthusiasm. So I spent, you know, 2 days working with my mom on that Echo Show. And all she had to do with that was just, she didn't have to do anything. In fact, she was told not to touch anything. It was simply, I would pop in and I would be there on the screen and then we would have a conversation. She didn't want anything to do with controlling it, touching it. And then, like I said, I didn't want her to. And then the other access is, and it goes along with the support network. Is there someone there willing and able to help with that acquisition? So my middle sister is the one who lives near my mother, and she is great about getting her to the doctors and doing all of that medical kind of support. But at the end of the day, my sister is just not a techie. She doesn't really care too much about getting involved with tech stuff. She uses her phone and her computer, and that's about it. And so during the pandemic, we weren't able to do really the Echo Show until I was able to get on a plane and go see her, because I was the one that had that interest and that skill to get her set up with that. And again, the financial access piece. So we've gotten over the hurdle of the availability geographically and service provider wise, and we've got someone that can do it. And then it comes down to, ooh, what should we get? What should I buy? What should I try and do? And the first question is, well, where do I get it? Sometimes I get calls from people that are wanting a good deal on an iPad or a good deal on an Amazon Echo. And I simply explained that most of that pricing is pretty well set. And going from one vendor, you're not going to get a lot of price difference between one vendor and another. You have to decide who's going to set it up, when is it going to happen. The one-way and two-way communication. So as I described, the Echo Show is technically a two-way device. If I had gotten my mom to be able to kind of read more commands, she would have been able to engage and reach out on her own. But the way we ended up setting it up and the way it was used was one way, it was passive. So I would connect in, and then we'd have a conversation. Account management is a big one with any of these devices. As the person who questioned about the thermostat alluded to, is what happens if something goes wrong? So you do want to think through the account management of how the device is set up. For example, with the Amazon Echo, you do need to have an Amazon account. And so in our house, we obviously have our own Amazon account. So I would not have wanted to put my mom's Echo under our account. So I manage her Amazon account for her, and that is how her device is registered to her account, and so that I can then work with her settings specifically to her, because I would not want her device to start playing music when I ask my device in my house to play music. So you have to think through the account and the login information and the secret questions, so that if you get locked out, things like that. And then who's going to teach or troubleshoot or do those updates? I remember when my parents first got their first iPhone, they're like, what's this red dot for with the number 8 in it? And I'm like, those are the updates. You need to update your phone. So helping through some of those questions and decisions. So this is my summary slide. If someone asks you about this kind of topic, you'd say, does the technology or the tools we want to use, do they need to be connected? And if so, what are our options? And can I afford it? Is the person willing to use it? Are you worried about privacy? And then who's going to set it up, teach the person, maintain it, and be there for any problems? And then the last one is, will it cause confusion or frustration? So the weekend I set that show up for my mom, I had a few moments where I really, I had to say, whose goal was it? And I knew it was more my goal than hers. And there was a few moments where I thought, is this just going to be more stress for her? But we worked through it, and she got to know that I'd be calling her every day between noon and 1 on that Echo. So, but I had to think long and hard of it. I saved the receipt in the box in case we had to return it in the 14-day time period. So that kind of summarizes the things that you would want to ask related to solutions. And then just wanted to point out, you do have resources throughout the state of Wisconsin in your independent living centers and your aging and disability resource centers. So your independent living centers, there's a map of those on the screen, and they have most of this technology available for a short-term trial. So they are subcontract with our agency to provide demonstration and loan of assistive technology. So you can reach out to the one in your area, and that would be Society's Assets. And they do have this technology and can answer these questions for you. As well as your ADRC, they are very knowledgeable about technology or about their resources. And if they don't know the answer, they'll be the first ones to send you to your independent living center. And then I do have a list of resources on here. So DHS, we did provide some guidance on engagement through throughout the pandemic. There's a link for the independent living centers. And then the Wisconsin AT for All site does have the information that of which of those independent living centers has which device. The TEP and TAP programs are funding resources for telecommunications. The I Can Connect program is funding for people that need telecommunications that have hearing and vision loss. And then there is a website called Generations, and you would just need to search Generations iPad tutorial. And they actually have, and I'm not sure maybe the library has it, but there, again, there's a link to this, but it'll actually walk someone through how to use an iPad or an iPhone. And then there, to my knowledge, the broadband assistance from the FCC is still available for people to apply for. And that provides an offset of the cost to maintain high-speed internet in the home. And then I have my contact information, and I'm always happy to answer questions. So I appreciate your time and attention this evening.
No, you're good. Okay. So Laura, I need to turn on my video.
There you go.
So thank you so much for joining us this evening. And okay, and you're good too. Okay. And we'll be sharing this information with our audience on YouTube. And thank you very much for taking the time for us tonight, Laura.
You're welcome. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.